James, if you would, go ahead and go there. The book of James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. And that deals with the subject of faith and works. I don't even know why James should have even had to have addressed this, other than it was a problem in the church. And I will tell you today that problem that they had some 2,000 years ago with faith and no works, it's almost reversed, so to speak, today. That we have, and this is the emerging, the seeker-sensitive church has turned into doing good works, and then you kind of emerge over time into being a Christian because of your good works. And that's because of the great misunderstanding in this passage. I believe that we are living in such a unique time that honestly, in America and the American church, we have lived for many years on the blessings of our founders. Not only founders of the nation, but the great men and women of God, of our Christian founders. And we have lived on these blessings, and we've not had to really seek after God, so to speak, the way that they had to, or even people in other countries are having to today. We just sang a song, Lord, I Need You. We don't really know what it's like to need God. Or we, not for, I mean, you know, we're getting flooded here. But we have everything we need to help us to get over the floods. If it gets too hot, we turn the air on. If it gets too cold, we turn the heat on. If my water's not cold enough, I turn my refrigerator up. I mean, we don't need God like many other Christians do. But I think that could change, and it will change. And actually, it needs to change. It needs to change, and I begin to think about this. And then when you read a scripture that you find in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 6, without faith, it is impossible to please Him. So then I've got to go to James chapter 2 and see what James has to say about faith, because I know Paul says that it's by grace, not works, but grace through faith, not works, that a man is saved. And then James comes in chapter 2 and he starts talking about if you don't have works, then you don't even have faith. So I know that this group understands that there's not a contradiction between Paul and James. It's just the context is different. Because you're not going to do a word study and find the difference. Faith for James is faith for Paul. Works for Paul is works for James. The Greek words are all the same. You're not going to go to do your word studies and find the difference. So you have to find it in the context. Because there is not a contradiction. Not at all. Let's go ahead and read the passage for the ones that are not familiar with it. James chapter 2, we pick it up in verse number 14. Now I'm going to tell you, whenever I was doing this study, and we could really stay here all day, but boy, when I got to verse 15, I'm going to stop there just for a moment, because I want to give a little shout out to the women. But anyway, let's go. Verse number 14. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? Then verse 15. If a brother or sister, I'm going to stop there. Do you realize that here if a brother or sister, boy, I think sometimes we just miss the richness of God's Word. Here we're talking about a woman. A brother or a sister, a little bit uncommon, is it not? Do you know what the Christian faith has done? It has elevated the woman above any other, better than any other culture or better than any other religion. The Christian faith has done this for women. We just can't let it go. We just can't let it go. We still want to suppress women. But here, even James is saying, if a brother or sister is naked. So in other words, not only if a brother is in need, but also if a sister is in need. It goes a little bit deeper than that. We'll discuss that in a few moments. If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that there is one God? You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac, his son, on the altar? Do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? And the scripture was fulfilled which says, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And he was called a friend of God. You see then that a man is justified by works and not by faith only. Likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. Greatest tragedy in the Christian world, in the church today, is people who profess Christ and yet do not live for Him. They say they're a Christian. They may even attend church every Sunday. They may do other things, but yet they have no work to back up their faith. And I will tell you, let me tell you what's going on in this scenario. You've got this side of the church that says, I have faith. In other words, they're saying there's two entities here, faith and works. This group says, I have faith, this is my gift. This group over here says, I have works, this is my gift. James is saying, foolishness. That's nonsense. There is no difference. Now, in the first service, I was preaching this, and I don't see them here for the service because it's kind of weird how the Lord works, I guess. But they said, Pastor, I really loved your message, and it just that faith and works is like love and marriage. They're not different. They're together. And I go, yeah, you're right. It's just like a horse and carriage. You're talking about the sitcom. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You know the sitcom, do you? Love and Marriage. You never watched it before? It's really not a husband and wife type of thing. But this is where they got. But yet they somehow or another they hooked it together because we think faith and works are separated. We believe they're different things. And James is here telling us they are not. And James is not contradicting Paul. Paul is not contradicting James. And the reason I know, because if James was teaching something wrong, Paul would be in his face. If you don't think Paul would be, then read the Bible where Peter was acting with the Gentiles. He was Gentile when he was with the Jews. He was with the Jew. And Paul confronted Peter to his face. And Peter is the man. He is the man. He's the one. He's the one that was always outspoken, that was very boastful, that always had something to say. So for Paul to confront Peter, you better believe he got all into James. But James was hitting the nail right on the head. And today, I hope and pray that you will at least stop and think, is my faith, or are there any works backing up my faith? I'm not even going to talk about what the works are. Different person. Because if it's not, James says it's dead. And if your faith is dead, here is your future. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I know you not. How sad would it be to be in church, hear the preaching, call yourself a Christian all your life, and to hear the words, depart from me, I don't know you. And you're saying, Pastor, it would never happen. Yes, it will. And it's going to, for millions. This is a great tragedy. So James is addressing this. And he says that we've got a group of people, and I'm wondering how many of these were even saved under Paul's ministry, so to speak, that you've got a group of people who do not live pure or righteous lives. They do not give all that they have to take the gospel, to reach need. Actually, it's gotten so bad, in my opinion, James is using an example of someone naked and destitute. In other words, they don't even have the necessities to live. And he says, and you won't even help them, let alone take the gospel to anyone. How terrible this church had got. Well, that's where we are today. Now, we might think about feeding people, but we are not ministering to souls and spirits at all. So James says, with these people and these actions, he asks two questions. Are they saved? And do they have a genuine faith? These are questions you better be able to answer. And it better not be from someone telling you that you are. No, you better be able to look back in your life, and you better be able to identify these. James is condemning these people who claim to have faith but do not put their faith into practice by caring for others spiritually and physically. The reason I am bringing this out, guys, is because we are living in such a dangerous times as far as Christianity goes, that there are so many different teachings out there. Everything goes, and the symptoms, the judgment of that we have fallen away from God is there's nobody even on fire for God anymore. The young people, the old people, the church in general is just going through motions. And I'm going to bring some things out today that's going to hit you right between the eyes just like it did me. But thanks be unto God that at least today we can deal with it, because when our time is up, then our time is up. And I will tell you, if you are here today and you think you're a Christian and the Lord starts convicting your heart that you need to get right with Him, do not leave here today without getting right with God. The warnings have been set. And the ones that are playing around with God, James says your faith is dead. And his purpose here, he's trying to convince the Christians that half-hearted faith is no faith at all. He says such faith can only be claimed. In other words, you can only profess Christ, but you can't show anything about Christ. Such faith is no good at all, and it makes no difference in your life or the lives of others. Evidence that our churches are so inundated with this, that even the ones that are trying their best to follow the tenets, even the basic tenets of faith, sometimes we get lost in these battles. I was on Facebook, and I don't know. I don't know if my thinking is just completely. I don't know. I don't even know why I would even have a thought like that. But I'm watching a post, and if you've not followed the Methodists, every year, every 2 years, the American leaders in the Methodist Church is trying their best to bring homosexuality into the congregation. They are trying to do this, but they have so many African votes and other nations that it can't pass. It just won't pass. And it's these other nations' votes that are keeping it from happening. Well, and they put it on Facebook, and several people was happy and congratulated them and all this, which we should. And immediately I went to, instead of being happy and congratulating them, we should be heartbroken that they're even having an election about this in the church. But then the Lord took me down a path of even our own self, where we get upset and aggravated over music and everything else. Folks, if we're not careful, this could be symptoms of our walk with God, or lack of. That I need this in order to feel God. I need that in order for it to be really God. That the music's got to be hymns before I can worship, or the music's got to be contemporary before I can worship. Or the pastor must preach from the King James only, or there's no way I can listen. And if we're not careful, see, we all these things are just evidence piling up that we are looking for God in places God is not at, and therefore it just becomes a big problem, and much of it is brought back down to here. We got faith and works, and James is saying it's because we're making decisions. We've got people making decisions in our churches and are setting up church services and setting up the worship and setting up this that are not even saved. So today we must realize, am I truly a child of God, or am I wannabe? I'm doing this because I want to feel good about I'm going to go to heaven, when in reality we're not headed for heaven. James is condemning such faith that does not have works to back it up as mere an intellectual agreement to the set of doctrines, and that's exactly what's happening today. We have been set up with doctrines of a church instead of doctrines in the Bible. It's true whether you want to believe it or not. Which denomination you want to talk about, because I can go through the doctrines of most of them. And I can hear people preach, and I can tell you what doctrine they are following. See, it's an intellectual belief of faith in a set of doctrines, and it's church doctrines. Now, I'm not going to sit here and dog any denomination, but I was raised that you had 29 teachings, and those 29 teachings, you had to accept those before you become a member. And if you broke any of those 29 teachings, you were asked to surrender your membership. Then, of course, you have the 70 advice to members. And I know now that I look back, I know what they were doing. They were trying to legislate people into being holy and to be righteous. And whether it's the Baptist or the Methodist or whoever it is, they've always had the people's interest at heart. But you can't legislate holiness and righteousness. You can't do it. Only God is going to be able to do this. But He can't even do this if we're continually following a misconception of a basic thing called faith. James pointed out that it is useless of claiming to have faith that is not being supported by works. He even heard Jesus, what he would have taught, that Jesus would have taught that genuine faith, if you have a genuine faith, then you will do the will of God. You can read that in Matthew chapter 7, Matthew 25, and also Luke chapter 6. And Jesus would say that this genuine faith, or lack of a genuine faith, would also be a lack of love and mercy if you don't have true faith. That you're not going to have the love and the mercy that you should have for the brethren. When James in this passage says, can faith save him? Really, if you want to break this down, the passage could read, can that faith save him? The answer is no. It can't. That faith that does not have any works. Now again, we're not talking about now when you get in Galatians and Romans, Paul is talking about someone that doesn't know Christ, and he's saying, okay, you're a person, you don't know Christ, all you have to do is believe in Jesus, that He's the Son of God, have faith to believe this, then you can be saved. No works involved. But when the moment that happens, if it's a true confession, then immediately that faith in Christ, works get attached to it. They're together. You can't separate them. And if there's no works going on, then there's no faith. None. It's a dead faith. James even ascribes this to a dead corpse, a lifeless body. And he's saying it's useless to say that you have this faith if it's not supported by any works. James wanted to make this clear to the people. He loves the people too much. And then again he says even a brother or sister not only elevates the woman, but if you go in Galatians chapter 6, it also emphasizes the care believers should have for hurting members of a Christian community. Boy, I was listening to a message last night. Man, that guy was laying it down. Ooh, boy, I was in that message. I mean, this guy was preaching. And I normally don't like to watch TV preachers, but this guy was, I mean, I'm sitting there shouting with the people. And the people shouting, I'm having a good time. And then he gets on the people that's crying about being sick, and he's not making fun of him, but he's trying to make a point, and a point that God hears. But then he came up and he said, the problems you have, nobody cares. And you know what? He's right. Goes against the Bible, But he's right. You don't care about my problems. You don't. Oh, I'm not going to say that, Lord. Ooh. That one's even too rough for me. It's not because you don't like me or that I don't like you. I've got too many of my own problems. And if all of my problems will keep me from being concerned about your problems, then the devil's going to make sure that I have problems all the time. But James says a genuine faith will love not only the man, the woman, but the community of believers. That's his words, not mine. Paul is saying this in Galatians chapter 6. I'm not taking it out of context. This thing called Christianity looks a whole lot different in the Bible than it does in the world. Anyway, in America. And we've probably got a better handle on it here in the South than any other place. We're not only considered the Bible Belt, we're kind of considered the buckle of the belt. James, he took this truth that you have in 15 and 16, and he applied this truth of an illustration. He said, faith which does not result in works is dead. James, his whole thing here, he's trying to emphasize that faith and works are inseparable. They're not two different entities. In other words, he's saying works is not an added extra to faith, but it's essential to the expression of faith. Now let me say that again. That works are not an added extra to faith, but are essential to the expression of faith. They go together. They're not separate. Jesus in Matthew 7 says, you will know their fruits, or by their fruits you shall know them. And that's what Jesus said. If you got a problem with it, take it up with him. But then they got religious on James. And he said, they told James, but we believe in one God. Monotheism. Now, the Jewish people, at a point in time long before Moses, maybe somewhere around Abraham's time, they were polytheism. They believed in multiple gods. That's the reason the very first commandment that we learn is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Monotheism. So they're telling James, we believe in one God. And James says, great, good job. So does the devil's. Is that not what he says? He's congratulating them on their believing in their orthodoxy of one God and their biblical confession of that God is only one. Even today, if you go into the Jewish synagogue, you'll hear him say the word Shema. I believe is the way they say it. Shema, which means there is only one God, and which is also the center of the Christian faith. Well, James says if you believe in one God, so far so good. However, that's not enough. Because the devils believe in one God. Demons have faith. They professed. Read in the Bible where the demons, they knew who Jesus was. Read whenever he was casting them out of the boy. Before they went to the pigs, they said, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing? They knew who Jesus was. Sometimes I wonder how many demons appeared unto Muhammad and said, we know who you are, the prophet of Allah, and they shuddered with fear. Or any other God, none. But when they stood before Jesus, they identified, they knew who He was, and they trembled with fear. So if profession of faith of who He was is enough, then the demons would be saved. Is that not true? But are they? Of course not. If all it took was me to profess that He is Jesus, then the demons are meeting that criteria. But that would be ludicrous to say that. But we can't have it both ways. It can't be okay for us just to profess and we're okay with God, and the demons profess and they're not okay with God. We can't have it both ways. It cannot work both ways. It takes more than just a profession. Now, we're not talking about being saved. We're talking about, James is going from a pastoral point of view. He is telling the people, I'm sorry, I don't care if you got saved under Paul's ministry. If you don't have any works, then your faith is dead. You do not have genuine faith. In other words, he said, you're not saved. That's exactly what he's saying. You're not saved. You're playing church. That's what he's saying. Guys, my prayer, no one in this church will wind up in hell. But will you? And I'm going to do what James is going to do. James says, you give me one example, one, of someone that has true faith, that has no works. You show me one person. You give me one example. They couldn't do it. But James says, I'm going to give you two examples of someone with genuine faith that is followed by works. Because he said, I'll show you my faith by my works. So the first one that he throws out there is who? Abraham. Abraham was accounted as righteous for God because he heard, he trusted, he believed. And then we know his expression of his faith was surely carried out when he took the boy Isaac, who would be the one that would carry the seed that would bring the promise of Abraham being the father of many nations. He took Isaac to the mountain to slay him. His faith and works walked together. And the Bible says that he was called a friend of God. But I could hear those smart-aleck Gentiles in the church. That's us, you know. Saying, well, you know, you're just a little biased toward Abraham. Show me somebody else that's not a Jew. He said, I'll even do you better than that. Not only a Gentile, but I'm going to show you a Gentile that's of the worst of the worst. And by the way, this Gentile is also found in the genealogy of Mary, who comes to the genealogy of Christ, who was not a Jew, but her name was Rahab. And Rahab, she had faith, even though she did not know the God of the Jewish people. She had faith in what she had heard and what she had seen, and her faith was followed by her works. And we've seen that she was saved when they come to Jericho, her and her family. So he gave them two examples, one being Abraham, and my goodness, you don't get any better than Abraham, but then Rahab, and you don't get any worse than Rahab. And he said this thing, I don't care from the greatest to the least, from Abraham being a man with millions to Rahab who has nothing. It doesn't matter. This faith, genuine faith, works the same for everyone. They are works that follow the faith. They go hand in hand. You cannot separate them. But this mere intellectual acceptance of belief without corresponding change of a lifestyle is nonsense and foolishness. You're wasting your time, you're fooling yourself. But today, here's the problem. We are living in a day of deception. And do you know what the problem is with deception? You're deceived and you don't know you're deceived. So how can you know? What you need to do, and Christy, come on, because I've got to end. What you need to do is get before God and have Him to play your life out before you. Remove all the pretense, remove all the religion, remove everything you've been taught, and just allow Him to play your life out and see if your life matches up to what James is calling faith and works. Are there fruit being produced? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're thinking fruit is by the souls you're winning for the Lord, forget that, because you can't produce that kind of fruit. Your fruit and my fruit may be different, but they're both going to be fruit. You know, if there was someone in this church, or someone even came in this church, that was destitute and hungry, they wouldn't leave here without being fed. There's no way. We'd never do that. Never. But there's Christians in other countries that are being persecuted, and we're not even praying for them. James says, a body without the Spirit is dead. A body without the Spirit, a body without a life-giving force, a body without breath to sustain it is death. And he said, and that's what faith without works is, just like a body without breath. It's dead. Now, you may not care much for the message. You may not care much for me criticizing lack of works, but it's not me criticizing. I care way too much for you to allow us to keep pushing forward, because if this church is going to do anything, it's going to push forward, and we are going to hit obstacles, and we're going to hit these problems. We're going to stand against these problems. We're going to do these things, and I'm going to tell you, we better know that God is with us, and we better make sure that we are with God. Because if not, Satan will absolutely have a heyday with us. We cannot get into these battles when we are not even born again. When there is not even true faith to be found, a genuine faith. We can't do it. But if you say, well, I'll just stay away from the battles. No, because the end result's going to be eternity in hell. Because it's not an option whether we're going to fight or not. We're all commissioned to fight, to engage. So my question is, do you have genuine faith? Is there evidence, if you went to court of law, to support that you are a Christian? Go ahead.